You know, when we want to understand how a piece of software works, we look at its code, right? To figure out an AI, we study its training data. But what about us? What are our source files? Well, it turns out we're not run by data. We're run by something way more powerful and a lot more invisible, the stories we believe.
And that's really the heart of it. All those lessons from our teachers, the narratives from our families, our communities, they're not just little bits of entertainment. They are, quite literally, the operating system for our brains. They program our entire worldview, how we make decisions, and what we believe on the most fundamental level.
But you know, the most powerful story of all is the one we tell ourselves. Think of it like a constant filter running in the background of your mind. It's what makes you see something as a golden opportunity versus a terrible risk. It defines what you believe is actually possible for you. It's that little voice that whispers what to do when the path forward isn't clear at all.
Okay, so if these stories are so powerful, what do they actually look like in the real world? Let's get out of the abstract and into some concrete examples. We're going to look at 3 modern-day business parables, real stories that show how a single narrative can build an empire or, bring one crashing down.
Our first story is a bit of a warning. It's about a company that, for a time, pretty much was the internet. But it completely lost its way. And honestly, it's because it couldn't decide what its own story was. Let's talk about Yahoo.
I mean, it's almost impossible to overstate just how dominant Yahoo was back then. For hundreds of millions of people, Yahoo was the front door to the entire web. Your email, the news, search, shopping, they had it all. They looked completely untouchable.
And that dominance? Well, it was reflected in their value. At their absolute peak, they had the biggest head start in the history of the internet. But underneath all that success, there was a huge problem they couldn't see. Their story was a total mess.
And right here, this is where their big problem becomes crystal clear. Yahoo's story was, "We are everything." Now, that sounds ambitious, but think about it. It's also super vague. It doesn't give you any direction. Now compare that to their little upstart competitor at the time, Google. Their story was razor sharp. We organize the world's information. All of a sudden, every single decision, every new hire, every line of code could be measured against that one powerful mission.
And this quote just nails the outcome perfectly. Yahoo drifted. They actually passed on buying Google twice. They became a portal to everything, but a destination for absolutely nothing. The big lesson here? A powerful story isn't just for inspiration, it's your navigation. And without one, you're just lost at sea.
So a vague external story leads to drifting. But what about our internal one? Our next story is all about how the narrative we tell ourselves about failure can change absolutely everything. This is the story of James Dyson.
Just look at that number. Let it sink in for a second. That's how many prototypes James Dyson built before he finally perfected his bagless vacuum cleaner. 5,126 times he failed. Now imagine the story most of us would tell ourselves after the 100th failure, let alone the 5,000th. I'm just not cut out for this, or this is totally impossible.
But see, Dyson was telling himself a completely different story. To him, those weren't failures. Each broken prototype wasn't some huge mistake. It was, in his own words, the tuition he was paying for an education in innovation. Every single attempt taught him something new that the last one couldn't.
And that's the crucial insight, isn't it? The winning story isn't about somehow avoiding failure, it's about reframing it as learning. It's about building a narrative where every single mistake is just data. It's another step on the path to getting it right. The goal isn't to be perfect, the goal is to learn faster than your competition.
Okay, so we've seen how a story can define a company's direction and an inventor's persistence. For our last parable, let's look at how a story, baked into a single simple rule, can define an entire culture. This is a story of radical trust, and it comes from the Ritz-Carlton.
This number represents one of the most legendary rules in all of business. At the Ritz-Carlton, every single frontline employee, from the bellhop to the front desk clerk, is empowered to spend up to $2,000 per guest per incident to solve any problem right there on the spot. No manager's approval needed.
Just think about the story that simple rule tells. The traditional model, that's a story of control and mistrust. It basically says, we don't really trust you, so you need to get permission for everything. But the Ritz-Carlton story is the complete opposite. It's a story of empowerment. It says, we hired you because you're a smart problem solver. We trust you to do the right thing for our guest. So what was the result? Did employees just go around wasting the money? Not even close.
That story of trust unlocked this incredible creativity. You had employees flying laptops to guests who left them behind, hiring emergency tailors for last-minute suit repairs. It created a legendary culture of service and loyalty that no amount of advertising could ever buy.
So, we've seen how these stories play out in the real world, how they can shape fortunes and define entire legacies. Let's kind of bring it all together now and turn the focus back to where it really matters the most.
So, we've explored 3 really powerful stories. From Yahoo, we learned that a focused, clear vision will always beat vague ambition. From Dyson, we saw that reframing failure as an education is the absolute key to innovation. And from the Ritz-Carlton, we learned that a culture built on radical trust will always outperform one built on rigid control.
And that's the real takeaway here at the end of the day. The stories we carry with us, they don't just describe our reality, they create it. They can be your map, your best lesson, or your greatest source of power. Which brings us to the final, and really the most important question of all. What story will you tell next?